now we're going to hand things over to Jamie Wellborn.
Hello, everyone. On behalf of the co-founders of the Center for Culturally Proficient Educational Practice, we welcome you to the second half of Convocation. This afternoon, we will continue to explore this most important question: where do we go from here? My name is Jamie Wellborn. I'm an assistant professor in education leadership at St. Louis University in St. Louis, Missouri. I'm a former teacher and school administrator, and I have the honor of being the president of one of the affiliate centers, the Midwest Collaborative for Cultural Proficiency in Schools. This morning, just like you, I had an opportunity to listen and learn from Dr. Terrence Roberts. As I reflect on the answer to where do we go from here, I'd like to link Dr. Roberts, Dr. Lindsay, Dr. Stanley, Dr. Terrell, and Dr. Luke's words. They gave us a lot to think about as we continue our journey. Assess who you are, know who you are, be comfortable with who you are. Talk to each other, listen to others. Commit to lifelong learning and be willing to learn from others. Lean into that learning because learning saves us. Take a step closer. Shine the light. Care enough to confront. Create the conditions for people to do their very best work. And give voice to an idea, send it out to the universe, and see where it goes. We, the authors of Cultural Proficiency, are enthused that educators across the nation are making travel plans, choosing routes, and committing to the journey of opening doors for all students to thrive in our education systems. As you saw in the video, through the Center for Culturally Proficient Practice, we now have a number of affiliate centers across the nation, leading educators and schools in applying the tools of cultural proficiency to examine the ways in which our policies, practices, and behaviors are impacting the children in our schools. This afternoon, you will hear about the next cultural proficiency book in press with Corwin, Leading Through the Lens of Cultural Proficiency. Through research, this book addresses where do we go from here. You'll also hear from a panel of school leaders implementing and sustaining this work in their schools and districts. You'll hear just exactly where they're going from here on their journeys. Without further ado, I would like to move into the book talk for this afternoon, Leading Through the Lens of Cultural Proficiency. I am joined today by three very dear friends and co-authors on this book, Tamika Casey, Keith Myatt, and Randy Lindsay. As I am pulling up the slides for our book talk, I would like to hand it over to Tamika and then Keith to say hi and introduce themselves. Tamika? Not sure Tamika's with us. Keith, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, although I don't see Tamika in the, maybe she is using another name. Hi, I'm Keith Myatt, and it's been my pleasure for the last, a little over a year or more to work with Jamie in telling the story that she experienced in working with the Evanston School District. And what it is that she learned. She actually created a research article, and a number of us felt that the research article, while it was scholarly and wonderful, needed to be told in the form of a story. And so it was our pleasure to work with her in getting down to the details of how cultural proficiency was used in Evanston to make the changes. And we have a number of things that we'd like to share with you in terms of what it is that what's in the book. And what we've really taken to heart, this idea that Evanston went through a journey. And so we've maybe stretch that metaphor a little bit, but it really, really works when we start thinking about the journey of any group when we and move using cultural proficiency as the lens for that work.
All right. Did Tamika join us?
Don't see her yet.
Not sure. All right, I'll go ahead and. All right, so a couple of logistic things. At the end of this presentation, this will actually be available to you probably on the CPEP website. So be sure, we're going to show you some slides today. Some of them we know have very small print, and so we'll be providing that to you through the CPEP website. In addition to that, you're going to see 3 articles on the very next slide. As soon as I'm done with this part, I'll actually drop those links in the chat for you as well. Those are the 3 research articles that we first put out that tells really the story of Evanston School District, and we're kind of the foundational pieces to this book. So we'll start just a little bit and tell you briefly about the research. Specifically, the purpose of the research was to investigate the implementation and experiences of cultural proficiency work in a suburban public school district. When you think and you think about your experience in reading the manual, it does such an amazing job of laying out the 4 tools, providing learning strategies that school leaders can use. And what we wanted to add to that piece was someone's story of doing that very task. So here, what you'll see again, as Keith mentioned, this was first just a research article that I published. And so I want to just tell you a little story about how the book came to be, because that wasn't the intent at first as we were moving through the research. So long story short, my dissertation is where I found the cultural proficiency framework. And I happened to reach out to 3 dear friends on this call, Randy Lindsay, Ray Terrell, and Keith Myatt, to see if they would validate a little old person like me, my survey for my dissertation. And I thought I would never get a response. I thought it was pretty lofty to reach out to those experts. But within a day, I had heard from each of those 3. From there, the relationship formed with those individuals. And the very next thing that I knew, I was being trained. I went through the certification training in San Bernardino School District. And that's where I met Tamika Casey, who is also an author on this book. During the last day of that training, I can remember being in the car. I rode with Randy and Dolores to the school district site that final day. And Randy and I were having a conversation about some of the work that I was doing in a particular school district. And from there, really, this book was born, if you will. So if you're wondering a little bit, the book will be out in January, but these 3 research articles may give you a kind of a bird's eye view of the path that we take in the school district or in the book. So again, I just want to check to see if Tamika was here. Something might have happened. I don't want to overtake her slides if she has popped in, but if not, I'll keep rolling. So just to give you an idea of what I went in as a researcher investigating, I wanted to know how do leaders describe their role in school change for culturally proficient practice? So as districts implement and apply the tools of cultural proficiency, how do they really describe their own role in leading this? The second piece of that was, in what ways do the school district's implementation plans and experiences actually influence change associated with culturally proficient practice? And so that's where you'll follow in the book the path or the journey, if you will, that Evanston takes in actually implementing the framework of cultural proficiency. And the third question, what I wanted to find out, what challenges, and we've addressed some of that today with our Sitting in the Fire conversation, what challenges do educational leaders face during the work of cultural proficiency? Now you'll see there below in the green, there are three real common themes that exist really in any school organization. I know if you look closely into some of the other culture proficient books, some of the application books, you will find books that address these three very same components. So continuous improvement and growth, professional learning communities, and school and community partners. Those were the three emerging themes throughout the book. So here you'll see, and we have to make this brief, of course, we could talk all day about the research, but we want to kind of bring it in or bring this piece to a close so we can get into telling you a little bit more about the book. The conclusions and recommendations that came out of the findings from the research really focused on those three emergent themes, but then we developed these recommendations based upon that. The first one that you'll see there, develop a common language around the culture proficiency framework. Evanston School District knew as they implemented this, and if there were to be any chance of sustaining this work, that they had to develop a common language around the framework. Specifically, what that means is knowing what those tools are, knowing the pieces that fit within each tool, but most importantly, being able to use that language in all aspects of the school district. So whether you're sitting in an IEP meeting, whether you are hosting a family event where you're inviting those in, whether you are rewriting curriculum or whether you're talking through hiring practices, they knew that all employees, staff, and even beyond family members and community members needed to have that common language. And the words, the density of the words within that culture proficiency framework really gave them that avenue to do this most important work. So Keith, do you want to talk about the second one there?
The idea, and I think you've noticed that these three areas, developing a common language, building the capacity of stakeholders, and aligning strategic plans and visions, are really the recipe for success in any large organizational changes. The wonderful thing about this book and what we've all been waiting for is the thorough application of these leadership and change principles using the tools and the lens of cultural proficiency. So in Jamie's story around how she actually worked with each stakeholder, the work that many of us have done in having the parent group get together and working with the cabinet, in working with the superintendent and working with the principals, and how they're going to really do that, and how they actually had to begin by looking at their policies and then aligning them with practices and behaviors so that we could then have all those circles are aligned around the ideas of cultural proficiency. And then what are we spending our money on? What's our strategic plan here? So aligning resources with the vision and with the goals of improving learning through using the cultural proficiency. All of these things these are all part of the story. And I think you're going to recognize these as you go through the book.
Absolutely. So you'll see the last one there, and I do need to make this brief. I'm watching that time tick. But the superintendent, when he set out to initiate this work, his main goal is that, one, it was done in the right way, and in a way that didn't close doors on people and shut it down, where they would have to kind of recharge and start this work again in a couple of years. But he also wanted to make sure that it was embedded in every aspect. And when I say every aspect, the district has worked over the last 5 years to really embed it in every department, every grade level, every school. And so that's a lot of the strategic planning. In this particular book, you'll notice that we parse out the equity action plan and the goals associated with this work. With the actual strategic planning. What does this work look like in year 1? What does it look like years 3 to 5? That has become a pretty critical piece in them being able to sustain this work over time. So quickly here, you will see just a snapshot of really the table of contents of the book a bit, or the chapter titles at least. So the book's divided into 3 parts. I'm just going to talk about the first one, and then I'll hand it back over to Keith just to mention a couple of things. But part 1, you can see there, really brings out some of the themes that carry throughout the book. The one is always leading this equity work with why. In that, in those first couple of chapters, we really get into the why of cultural proficiency. We talk about the Evanston School District extensively, but also really address the way in which cultural proficiency has been led in that in the school district. The third one there that you see, the intersectionality of race and social class. So in chapter 3, we get into critical race theory, race and social class in education. And then the 4th chapter there you see really focuses on that leadership piece. So those first 4 chapters, part 1 of the book, really sets the foundation for those themes that travel throughout the remainder of the book. So Keith, you want to take part 2 and 3 there?
And then everyone, those of us who have done this work will see this, that part 2 is again looking at and all the books contain the tools of cultural proficiency. What you get in addition in this book is the story of how each of those of the strategies and the effect of those meetings and organizational structures, that then how they changed the way that things got done in the district. So it's a very specific story. One of our fears is that people will see this as a recipe book. What our hope is that you will see this as a successful journey using cultural proficiency towards school change, and that you will then be able to adapt and adopt those things that make sense for you in how to do this work in your own organization.
Absolutely. So I'm going to bridge. I see we probably have 30 seconds left. So in part 3 that you see there, it really provides some additional tools that were developed within the district. And Keith will talk about this one just briefly.
So the travel guide is the way we've helped to organize or to introduce each of the chapters. And they are really kind of a leadership guide to how to be thoughtful about doing systemic work. So what data are you gathering? What resources do you have? What's the culture of the district? Because this is culture work, so you need to be constantly concerned about the entire culture and all the different components of it. The other one is specifically what vocabulary are we working on here? People have always talked about that one of the powers of cultural proficiency is it provides a vocabulary for talking about difference. And the last thing is, which we get from cognitive coaching, is what are you getting out of this as the leader of this work? So constantly getting you back to, okay, all this is good for my organization, but what's in this for me as a school leader? So focusing on your own growth is as important as focusing on the growth of others.
So look for this book in January. We're super excited to share with you all of these new resources or tools, if you will. Here's the strategic planning that we were talking about just a few minutes ago. What could this look like in your district, year 1, year 2? If you're thinking about a district-wide model or even a building-wide model, what can this implementation process really look like? I talked about embedding it in all aspects of the school district. So you can see here, this is a graphic from the book that really takes an organizational chart of a district and maps out basically how these goals of cultural proficiency, where the district committee identified inequities and really narrowed in their focus on 3 goals, how it spreads across certain not organizations, but departments within the school system. Also, a new graphic here real quickly. This explicitly says, how do teams actually apply these tools of cultural proficiency? In a few minutes, you're going to hear from some panelists, some school leaders who are using this very same model and implementing this work in their school district as well. Again, we're going to drop this link for you, not this link. we're going to put this link on the CPEP website so that you can go in and kind of really look at some of these. We know that there's not time for all of it. This dispersion pattern has been one of our most favorite graphics that's been added to the material, thinking about when you go through a culture proficiency training, right? When you're facilitating conversations with a group of teachers or a group of leaders, what are the different levels of change that have to occur for it to impact students? One of the things we caution is those random acts of equity, and that's some words from Glenn Singleton. But trying to check the box on this work sets us up for failure. As school leaders, we have to be prepared to not only implement this work, but sustain it over time and engage in this reflection, dialogue, and action process to make sure that we are making changes, we are confronting what we need to confront to open doors for all students. So one last drop. Podcast is coming out as well, very close to the launch of the book. So please look for Leading Through the Lens of Culture Proficiency.
Thanks, Bailey.
Yes. Thank you, Bailey, for helping us. We've already recorded the first 4 episodes. It's conversations with us as authors. So we look forward to sharing that with you as well. And for time's sake, I don't want to monopolize the time, but leave you with this question: and how are the children? It's a tribute to the Maasai. If you have time, look up Terry Harris TED Talk. He talks a little bit about that most important question that we are faced with, and how are the children? So thank you all for listening. Keith, did you want to say anything before we close out our book talk and hear from our other school leaders implementing?
Yes, Jamie, this is the essence of this is Jamie's work, and we're going to be hearing a lot more from her in the future. So her email's there. I recommend you make her a contact. Tamika is also part of the big future of us old guys are moving on. So these 2 people are going to be doing a lot of work in this area in the future, and stay in touch with them.
Thank you, Keith.